We are further south in the Museum Park project. We're looking at a couple of things. Directly behind me is a building that they're calling, I believe, Museum Park 1, and there's going to be a twin next door. Museum Park 1 is a really good example of the kind of building that looks great from far away, and when you get close to it and you actually see the base, what it looks like as you approach it, you kind of wonder what the architects were thinking. This is a building that when you pass it on Lakeshore Drive, it makes this terrific geometric statement, this white thing with red cross-hatching, and it's really very cool. And then you drive around to actually walk into it, and you approach it, and as my esteemed colleague, the photographer, Mr. Zekas, says, it looks like they were aiming to get a Best Buy as the tenant in the ground floor. It's pretty awful. Or it's just really very uninteresting. It looks forbidding and not very welcoming. But there must have been a reason why they did it, and it probably is the kind of thing that looked better in the drawings than it really looked like when they finally got it built.
Is it possible that they maybe had some more expensive, attractive materials in mind, and
you know, that is an excellent point that you make.
At the last minute,
because that's really what often happens at a lot of projects, is that because if you can imagine that this building might have suggested that it all be done in brushed stainless or some kind of metal, at least the base of the building probably would have turned out to be something really cool.
But it looks like we ran out of money at the last minute.
It really does. I didn't even think about that, but you're probably right, because in terms of the way that thing is masked and even the colors, it looks like it could be really cool if it were in a better material. But the painted concrete is really wrong. Otherwise, again, when you look at the building,
I only think of those kinds of things because I've been in a situation where I've run out of money at the last minute.
Yeah, right, so, really. And getting out of the street. Something else we thought we could take a look at was the continuation of this sort of traditional neo-historical stuff in Central Station. So all the way down, further north of where we're standing now, is a later phase of townhouses and a high-rise that I can only describe as in kind of a
let's get closer over there and take a look at it.
I don't even know how to describe that complex over there, but the best way I think I can do it is to call it Neo-Pomo.
Neo what?
Neo-Pomo. It's postmodern, but you're going to get killed. It's postmodern, but it was built probably 10 years after postmodernism was really something that was an acceptable trend in architecture. And
aren't we supposed to have a little Chippendale kind of topping up there or something?
Well, you know,
or did they run out of money on that one too, maybe?
I don't really know, but you know, there was a period when there was a particular person who was running the Department of Planning, and this was in the actually late 90s, when a building like this would have been proposed probably. And he decided, maybe because, or at least ostensibly because this is what the mayor liked, that every building had to be made out of red brick and use wrought iron trim and have a lot of limestone elements. And the one thing that he really required for almost every residential high-rise was that it have a little top. It would have to have a hat on top of it. And that's why you see a lot of buildings in Chicago. That the Park Tower, the Hyatt building on Michigan Avenue, would be a much better building. It's not a very good building, but it would be much better if it didn't have that silly little mansard roof on the top. But that was done, from what the architects apparently have said, because the Department of Planning insisted in those days that everything have a top and not end up flat. And that's probably why there's this funny little gable on this thing. But it's kind of ridiculous because it has really, that trim that's on the top, that crown molding, is something that's really off of a piece of furniture. It's not really an architectural element even, but it became thought of as an architectural element during the so-called postmodern movement. Now, even then it looked ridiculous, now it still does.
I get the impression from looking at it that they had some leftover materials, and they just kind of
tacked it on, really.
Built a suburban office building on the top.
And you know, it's possible that that might be some great space up there with some really dramatic windows. So I don't know, but it doesn't do much for me. And it all seems to grow out of the four-story stackables, which is what I'm sure those are. I'm sure those are not single-family residences. I'm sure they're duplex, or they're probably two units, one stacked on top of another one. And again, another kind of development type that never really works that well. There is another building similar to this over on where was that? 16th and Calumet, I think is what that must be. Maybe it's whatever. And it's again another kind of weird brick base with a very cool kind of glassy steel tower. Maybe we'll go back and photograph that when we leave here. So I think in general things aren't looking so promising down in this particular quarter of the Central Station Museum Park project.
Would you give this an ICBW or a WWTW?
I would give it a CBW. It could definitely be worse. And, you know, even think about this. At some time in the future, somebody could come back and clad the base of this building in something interesting, and then the whole thing would be a lot more unusual, or at least nicer for the street. One of the most interesting things about this edge of this property is if you just turn the camera around, you see we are within spitting distance of McCormick Place.
You sure are.
What's really interesting to me is the way the new construction neighborhoods are just kind of bleeding into each other. That this area has kind of consumed the whole historic district that is directly to the west of us, but that it's almost touching on what we think of as really the Donnelly Lakeside Press property, which has really been further and further distended from McCormick Place anyway. It's interesting how there's less and less vacant property anywhere close to the center of the city.